A simple assignment to protect a pop star turns into a major life-altering event for Crockett on today's Miami Vice. Like a Hurricane was directed by Colin Buxey and was written by Robert Palm. It's one of those episodes that's not very good on its own merits, but it will set the series on an exciting new trajectory, which makes up for some of its flaws. While MCs of rap performed domination at a flashy neon-lit club, a pop star named Caitlin Davies, played by Scottish pop star Sheena Easton, well known at the time for hits like 9 to 5 Morning Train and Strut, meets with a manager named Tommy Lowell. Lowell is played by prolific character actor Xander Berkeley, known for films like T2 Judgment Day and TV shows like The Mentalist and The Walking Dead. Lowell promises he can revive Caitlin's flagging career by bribing promoters with cold hard cash. He demonstrates this by introducing her to a record company VP named Benny Rose and passing him a big bribe to get a song by another pop star in his stable into the top 5. At this, agents from the U.S. Attorney's Office swoop in and arrest Lowell. Caitlin lets Lowell know she's behind his arrest as payback for several of her musician friends who were screwed over by him. At Vice headquarters, Crockett is annoyed to hear that Castillo is pulling him off his current case to act as a bodyguard for Caitlin until she's able to testify against Lowell. Crockett drops by Caitlin's home and meets her skeptical assistant Angie, played by 227's Toukie Smith, Robert De Niro's former longtime partner, before meeting Caitlin herself. Crockett and Caitlin immediately sling scornful and contemptuous insults at each other. They're downright rude and toxic to each other, and I know it's all in the service of surprising viewers later on when they fall madly in love, but it's still super obnoxious to watch. Lowell talks to his lawyer, Ralph Fisher, who is played by Teller, the silent half of the magician duo Penn and Teller. Recall, of course, that Penn, aka Penn Jillette, guest starred in the Season 2 premiere. While Teller is nonverbal as part of Penn and Teller, he talks up a storm in this episode, which is kind of a cheap thrill. Lowell wants Fisher to make sure the case against him is dismissed. Crockett accompanies Caitlin to the recording studio where she sings a cover of the 1965 Sonny and Cher hit, I Got You, Babe. They're still constantly hurling barbed personal attacks at each other, and it's still super obnoxious. LA-based record company executives Paul Fremont and Gordon Wiggins chat on the phone with Fisher, who tells them Lowell is committed to avoiding prison time with a veiled threat that he will name names at his trial. Instead of ponying up a huge chunk of cash for Lowell's defense, Fremont and Wiggins decide to simply have him killed. Fremont is played by Bob Gershon, and Wiggins is played by Tony Hendra, whom you all know as band manager Ian Faith in This Is Spinal Tap. Near as I can tell, he's playing a nakedly corrupt and evil version of Ian Faith here, which is mighty entertaining. At a bowling alley, Lowell hires a group of hitmen to kill Caitlin. Caitlin and Crockett go out for dinner together, and they're still awful. Crockett manages to offend Caitlin enough that she storms out of the restaurant. She's ambushed by Lowell's hitmen. Crockett hustles her into the safety of his scarab, and they speed away. In a quiet moment, Caitlin tells him of her personal connection to the case against Lowell. He managed her band in the early days of her career, and he ripped them off and possibly murdered her bass player. Her newfound vulnerability makes Crockett hot, and they make out in the boat. Vice stashes Caitlin in a safe house. Caitlin and Crockett continue to canoodle, and Tubbs openly disapproves. Lowell gets blown to pieces by a rigged cassette tape sent to him by Fremont and Wiggins, which means Caitlin no longer needs to be protected. And that's the end of the record company plotline for this episode. We will see Fremont and Wiggins again a few episodes down the road. Even though there's no more case, there's still a lot of this episode to get through. Crockett introduces Caitlin to his son Billy, which seems like they're moving kind of fast. Then, while Sheena Easton's While He Shines plays, he proposes to her, which is definitely moving too fast. He shows up at Vice headquarters and tells Gina about his engagement, and even though they haven't been friends with benefits for a couple of seasons, she's clearly heartbroken about this. When he tells the entire Vice squad, he gets a manly handshake and a smile from Castillo. Castillo has just been a smiling fool this season. Tubbs is happy for his partner, though he's open about his severe reservations in a scene that's loaded with ominous foreshadowing. Vice throws Crockett a jubilant party at which he's presented with a honeymoon trip to New Zealand. It's a really nice scene. The episode ends with Caitlin and Crockett tying the knot, while series composer Jan Hammer plays with the wedding band. This episode botches the introduction to Caitlin about as badly as it possibly can. Those early scenes with Caitlin and Crockett are some of my all-time least favorite Miami Vice scenes ever. I assume the creative staff were aiming for kind of a Glenn Ford and Rita Hayworth and Gilda vibe, where they trade witty but cutting barbs to disguise this fierce and all-consuming passion for each other, but it ends up just being rancid and toxic. Caitlin and Crockett attack each other's brains, personality, talent, appearance, and career choice, and there's no trace of humor behind any of it. It's really off-putting. Evidently, this episode was put on the fast track through the production schedule to try to keep Crockett's marriage a secret from the press until it aired, and I assume that's where the fault lies. If there'd been more time, the script could have been tweaked to make the banter more clever and less cruel, and the director could have instructed Don Johnson and Sheena Easton to dial back on the vitriol and the hostility in their performances. As soon as Crockett and Caitlin fall in love, they're cute together, and these two will have a nice, easy, relaxed chemistry for the rest of the season, but man, those early scenes are hard to watch. The episode's other big misstep lies in abandoning the case midway through. Lowell is murdered, so the case against him is dropped to the end. It'll be picked up again in a few episodes, which is good, but it's disconcerting to have a Miami Vice episode where the central case is ignored to the extent that it's wrapped up halfway through with no involvement from Vice. I love the idea of Vice looking into corruption in the recording industry, and I'm glad they'll be readdressing that later. But I'm giving this one to Flamingos for dropping the ball. Caitlin is going to be around for quite a while, and she turns out to be a pretty good character, so I'm sorry the show did her such a disservice with this introduction. Next time, Crockett and Tubbs tangle with the Yakuza. Until then, please subscribe to my channel or find me on Twitter to discuss Miami Vice, and I will meet you back here then. Have a great week.